The Super Bowl is the annual championship game of the National Football League, the highest level of professional football in the United States, culminating a season that begins in the late summer of the previous calendar year. The Super Bowl normally uses Roman numerals to identify each game, rather than the year in which it is held. For example, Super Bowl I was played on January 15, 1967, following the 1966 regular season. The single exception to this rule is Super Bowl 50, which is scheduled to be played on February 7, 2016, following the 2015 regular season. The game was created as part of a merger agreement between the NFL and its then-rival league, the American Football League. It was agreed that the two league champion teams would play in the AFL-NFL World Championship game until the merger was to officially begin in 1970. After the merger, each league was redesignated as a conference, and the game has since been played between the conference champions to determine the NFL's league champion. Currently, the National Football Conference leads the league with 26 wins to 23 wins for the American Football Conference. The Pittsburgh Steelers hold the record for Super Bowl victories with 6. The day on which the Super Bowl is played, now considered by some an unofficial American national holiday, is called Super Bowl Sunday. It is the second largest day for U.S. food consumption, after Thanksgiving Day. In addition, the Super Bowl has frequently been the most watched American television broadcast of the year. The four most watched broadcasts in U.S. television history are Super Bowls. In 2015, Super Bowl 49 became the most watched American television program in history with an average audience of 114.4 million viewers. The fifth time in 6 years the game had set a record, starting with the 2010 Super Bowl, which itself had taken over the number one spot held for 27 years by the final episode of M*KSH. The Super Bowl is also among the most watched sporting events in the world, almost all audiences being North American, and is second to soccer's UEFA Champions League final as the most watched annual sporting event worldwide. The NFL restricts the use of its Super Bowl trademark. It is frequently called the Big Game or other generic terms by non-sponsoring corporations. Because of the high viewership, commercial airtime during the Super Bowl broadcast is the most expensive of the year, leading to companies regularly developing their most expensive advertisements for this broadcast. As a result, watching and discussing the broadcast's commercials has become a significant aspect of the event. In addition, popular singers and musicians including Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince, the Rolling Stones, The Who, and Whitney Houston have performed during the event's pre-game and halftime ceremonies. Origin. For 4 decades after its 1920 inception, the NFL successfully fended off several rival leagues. However, in 1960, it encountered its most serious competitor when the American Football League was formed. The AFL vied heavily with the NFL for both players and fans. But by the middle of the decade the strain of competition led to serious merger talks between the two leagues. Prior to the 1966 season, the NFL and AFL reached a merger agreement that was to take effect for the 1970 season. As a part of the merger, the champions of the two leagues agreed to meet in a World Championship game for professional American football until the merger was effected. Lamar Hunt, owner of the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs, first used the term Super Bowl to refer to this game in the merger meetings. Hunt would later say the name was likely in his head because his children had been playing with a Super Bowl toy. A vintage example of the ball is on display at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. In a July 25, 1966, letter to NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle, Hunt wrote, I have kiddingly called it the Super Bowl, which obviously can be improved upon, although the league owners decided on the name of AFL-NFL Championship Game. The media immediately picked up on Hunt's Super Bowl name, which would become official beginning with the third annual game. Roman numerals were first affixed for the fifth edition, in January 1971. The Super Bowl name was derived from the bowl game, a postseason college football game. The original bowl game was the Rose Bowl game in Pasadena, California, which was first played in 1902 as the tournament East-West football game, as part of the Pasadena Tournament of Roses, and moved to the new Rose Bowl Stadium in 1923. The stadium got its name from the fact that the game played there was part of the Tournament of Roses and that it was shaped like a bowl, much like the Yale Bowl in New Haven, Connecticut. The Tournament of Roses football game itself eventually came to be known as the Rose Bowl game. Exploiting the Rose Bowl game's popularity, postseason college football contests were created for Miami, New Orleans, and El Paso, Texas in 1935. And for Dallas in 1937. Thus, by the time the first Super Bowl was played, the term bowl for any big-time American football game was well established. After the NFL's Green Bay Packers won the first two Super Bowls, some team owners feared for the future of the merger. At the time, many doubted the competitiveness of AFL teams compared with their NFL counterparts, though that perception changed when the AFL's New York Jets defeated the NFL's Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl III in Miami. 1 year later, the AFL's Kansas City Chiefs defeated the NFL's Minnesota Vikings 23-7 in Super Bowl IV in New Orleans, which was the final AFL-NFL World Championship game played before the merger. Beginning with the 1970 season, the NFL realigned into two conferences. The former AFL teams plus 3 NFL teams would constitute the American Football Conference, while the remaining NFL clubs would form the National Football Conference. The champions of the two conferences would play each other in the Super Bowl. The winning team receives the Vince Lombardi Trophy, named after the coach of the Green Bay Packers, who won the first 2 Super Bowl games and 3 of the 5 preceding NFL championships in 1961, 1962, and 1965. Following Lombardi's death in September 1970, the trophy was named the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and was the first awarded as such to the Baltimore Colts following their win in Super Bowl V in Miami. Date: the Super Bowl is currently played on the first Sunday in February. This is due to the NFL current schedule, which consists of the opening weekend of the season being held immediately after Labor Day, the 17-week regular season, the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, and the Super Bowl 2 weeks after the 2 conference championship games. This schedule has been in effect since Super Bowl 38 in February 2004. The date of the Super Bowl can thus be determined from the date of the preceding Labor Day. For example, Labor Day 2015 was September 7th. Therefore, the next Super Bowl is scheduled exactly 5 months later on February 7, 2016. Originally, the game took place in early to mid-January. For Super Bowl I, there was only 1 round of playoffs. The pre-merger NFL and AFL championship games, the addition of 2 playoff rounds, an increase in regular season games from 14 to 16, and the establishment of 1 bye week per team have caused the Super Bowl to be played later, partially offsetting these season-lengthening effects, simultaneous with the addition of 2 regular season games in 1978. The season was started earlier. Prior to 1978, the season started as late as September 21. Now, since Labor Day is always the first Monday of September, September 13th is the latest possible date for the first full Sunday set of games.